Well, good morning, everybody, and what a big morning it is in Australian sports. So welcome to Esports Friday. If you haven't attended before, if you haven't watched the video before, I'm Steve Pallas. I know nothing about esport. He's Cameron Ustalin. He knows lots about esport. That's why we work together very well. And for those that have been watching, you would be surprised to learn that Cameron's other love, apart from esport, his family is women's football. And Cameron, you'll be very happy that the Australian-New Zealand bid for the 2024 World Cup has been successful overnight.
Yep, and I have not slept a wink since the announcement because the anticipation was, I could taste it. It was scary. It was nerve-wracking. And then when the president of FIFA said, he didn't even get the rest of the word out. I was off. I flew out of this chair. I woke up my partner, Gabby, and it's incredible. This is a massive, massive moment, not just for women's sport, for women's football in Australia. It's a massive moment for sport in general in this country to have such an incredible tournament that's going to be coming to our shores and to, of course, New Zealand nearby. So it's a huge moment, and I can't be more excited.
Yeah, it is. It is, isn't it? And for those that in the community that don't necessarily follow the world game, men's or women, it's certainly, maybe as a nation, not quite as large as the Sydney Olympics, but it's certainly in that scale and that the effect it's going to have on the community over the next 4 years. And I think it's a really great follow-on from the Women's World Cup, particularly for women's sport. So I'm really excited to see what football do with it, and more broadly what women's sport do with it, because one of the risks of the COVID-19 is that women's sport may be a casualty in some way, shape, or form with investment, et cetera, and momentum and those sorts of things. So really excited to see what not just football, but what all sports do in this 4 year lead up, which is going to be
only 3 years. Because it's already been a year since the last one. So yeah, only 1,109 days to go. I'm not counting. But yeah, I think it'll be very interesting to see, and very encouraging to see what the other sports can do in that time, how they can, I guess, to use a marketing term, use the Women's World Cup as ambush marketing to piggyback and to use momentum from it to promote women's sport everywhere, because women's sport everywhere can benefit from this. And I think that's what's so incredible about it.
I agree. And we'll be looking to identify ways that we can learn, we can help clubs, regardless of their sport, join that journey. And I guess the key there is that we can learn off each other, Cameron. And so this is where we brings us into today's discussion on, it's Esports Friday, so I've been looking forward to it all week, as you know, particularly in the weeks where Richmond don't perform very well. It's the highlight of my week. So so for those that are online, jump into the conversation, ask your questions, be part of the conversations. We love it when you're part of it. Tell it, just say good morning and let us know who's there would be even great. But today, just picking up on that concept of what can we learn from each other, I'm really keen to understand how participants within gaming and esport are building such large audiences in comparison to our community sports clubs. So, Cam, that was the kind of homework that I set you last week, was to take us on a bit of a journey, and let's have a look at some of the really the esport participants with very, very, very large followings. So what have you got for us, Cam?
Well, I'm starting with a couple of names that we've mentioned a few times. It started with what was it, maybe the 7th week. And by the way, we've done 10 episodes of this already. So I hope you know more than nothing about esports by now. Otherwise, I'm not doing my job very well. But we had the two words mentioned. I won't even call them names at the moment, but the words Lazarbeam and Loserfruit mentioned as Australian content creators. And I
So
think
one of the things that I have learned, Cam, is in esports, as in roller derby, you have two names and your birth name is rarely used.
Indeed. Sometimes it does. As you can see on this list, the fifth person on this list that we're looking at here. So this is the top Australian YouTubers, so not global but local. And Lazarbeam's here at number 3, and then a guy called Lachlan is in at number 5. And then here's another gamer down here, Muzelk. These guys are actually all part of the same organization. They're all managed by Muzelk's sister's agency of sorts. So they've become quite entrepreneurial. They've created a brand called Click Management. It looks after them all. And they're probably the biggest Australian esports, or not esports, but gaming conglomerate agency that's going around at the moment. But yeah, so Lazarbeam and Loserfruit are two people that we've spoken about before. So I wanted to hone in on them. Lazarbeam being almost the number one YouTuber in Australia, bar 2 channels that are completely devoted to kids' toys. So that's his competition. And then further down the list, as we keep going, there might be some more more things that you might recognize. So like AC/DC come in at number 16. And a bit further down, we finally come across the first sporting listing of cricket.com.au. But it's interesting. So Cricket only 5 million followers compared to Lazarbeam's 15 million followers. What you find is that Cricket have got a pretty decent social media following across the board, but it's quite consistent. So I found on Facebook, they had a very similar following. I think it's about 6 million on Facebook. But if we look globally at a couple of the more well-known brands around the world, Barcelona for one, 9.5 million subscribers. So this fella here, Lazarbeam, who makes kind of silly gaming videos, has more than 5 million more subscribers than one of the largest sporting clubs in the world. You know, Barcelona's bounced between first and second, I think, on the Forbes most valuable sporting clubs or franchises in the world. So he's competing with a multi-billion-dollar industry for content, and he's just a local guy playing games.
And I think this is what I think we need to take just a moment to reflect on this, Cameron, the magnitude of the achievement and the monumental opportunity to learn, because I think it would be fair to say that if you were going to go and ask the community what would be the number one YouTube channel in Australian sport, you would think that it was either going to be one of the footballs or cricket, our national team, in a sense. And to see that cricket is got a third of the YouTube followers, and they have a professional social media. Well, they certainly did before COVID. A professional social media, digital media team whose goal is to feed that audience. It is to feed it, to grow it, to empower it, to engage it, to influence its behavior, and to think that an individual that is in esport has got 3 times that following is extraordinary. And so my question to you, Cam, and obviously not one that we're going to answer just today, but one on a journey that we're going to follow through the forever. How did they do that?
How did they do? Well, it probably comes down to the type of content that we're talking about. I think that's the number one thing that you can take away from why there's a big difference between these types of people on YouTube. If we look around the National Football League, America's biggest sport, the Super Bowl has, I think, maybe 200 million live viewers each year. They only have 6.5 million subscribers on YouTube. So what I take from some of this is AFL having 186,000 subscribers, so almost nothing. And this is the number one sport, professional sport in Australia. So I think that means that maybe sporting content, the way it's delivered in Australia, doesn't quite work on YouTube. It doesn't resonate with the YouTube audience. Let me flip this for a second before I like kind of break down some of the content that exists on YouTube. Barcelona.
I'm going to stop you there because that's a, to be fair, that's a massive statement. That is a huge statement to say that the way that our traditional sports are seeking to engage one of the fastest growing audiences in the world, which is the video audience, the video type audience, whether it's YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, whatever, is failing, comparatively tremendously.
Yeah. What would you say, without your Richmond bias hat?
I know we're all for the country today, Cam.
But is Collingwood more or less the biggest club, or like one of the biggest clubs in the AFL, like metric wise?
Yeah, from a designated supporter group, Collingwood, Brisbane Broncos in rugby league.
They have 23,000 subscribers on YouTube. How many members do they have?
Yeah, probably 4 times that, nearly 3 times that.
Yeah. So, I mean, without you looking at any of the content, and these guys have probably been around for quite a while on YouTube. Yes. Do you think it's working? Do you think what they're doing is resonating with their audience?
Well, I would have said until 20 minutes ago, I would have said yes. But when you've put it in that stark reality that an individual with a little bit of a team behind them has created an audience, and this is what fascinates me. This is not being critical of AFL, cricket, Collingwood, Richmond, whatever. What I'm really homing in on is the opportunity and your comment, Cam, that says, they're doing it wrong. And how do you justify that? Well, you justify that by saying the opportunity is nowhere near. Clearly, sports clubs are nowhere near taking advantage of that. And when we take it down to a community sport club, who's got massive followings within their community.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we've talked about a few times here is that going online, it's more than about just engaging your community. It's about trying to tap into the greater community, the wider community. And I think that's one of the things that sport misses a lot with social media. They use it primarily as a way to communicate with their base, with their membership, with their group. And that's fine. Like that's fine if that's all you use it for. But how do you grow when all you're doing is just communicating with the people that are already there? When you don't look at ways to engage with people that have never heard of you, or the people that don't necessarily find anything interesting about you other than maybe the footy on the TV, they don't actually come to look at your content. So, I mean, in contrast to their Facebook page, Collingwood have 360,000 people following their Facebook page. So, it's not necessarily saying that they do social media wrong, but maybe they haven't found the right things to be putting on YouTube, the right type of content to be putting on YouTube. Well, so I think that's something that smaller clubs and smaller associations don't necessarily put a lot of time and effort into thinking about, is what type of content and what are you doing on the different networks? Because each of them has a purpose, and it's different each time. Instagram is different to Facebook, is different to Twitter.
Well, and that's because they've got different audiences, and exactly. And my point is never, and it is never about wrong and right. It is more about opportunity, and so what you've established is there's the opportunity to 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times our audience because we can. So how is our good friend? What was his name?
Lazarbeam. Well,
Lazarbeam. How is he building this audience, Cam?
he's funny. He's very funny. He's obviously, I mean, I don't know. I was about to say he's playing a very popular game, but then football is a very popular sport. So, like, it's not really an analogy, is it? I can't say, okay, well, it's all down to him playing a popular sport. That doesn't just get you popular, does it? But
so what's he putting on YouTube? As a generalization, what is he putting on YouTube? And a couple of questions. What's he putting on? How many times a day is he going on to YouTube? And for how long is he on YouTube? For instance?
Okay, so Lazarbeam is not really a live streamer. He's a pre-made content specialist on YouTube. He does do some live streaming, but that's been more recently, and they're infrequent. His content is generally 10 to 15 minutes, maybe once to 3 times per week. And they're generally all funny, quirky. There's a lot of challenges of trying to break things, trying to break a record or do something that's never been done before. There's actually a very funny video. I quite enjoyed it, which he's titled, "This is the greatest video that I've ever done." Basically, the greatest Fortnite video ever. And all he does is win a game without doing anything, which doesn't seem very entertaining on the surface, but it's actually hilarious the way that he delivers it. So he's kind of looking at something that everybody does, which is play Fortnite, and he's looking at it from a very different angle, where he comes in and puts his own kind of spin on it, his own unique flavor, his own unique vision, his own different type of doing the way he does things. He might come in and use one type of item in a game, and he restricts himself, and he can only do that. And then he spends 8 hours trying to get a win. So I don't know, maybe it's like a footballer trying to win a match only using your head when you've got your arms, your legs, and every other part of your body. I don't know a good correlation, but he's trying to find quirky and fun and different ways to do something that everybody knows how to do. In the context of Fortnite, people who watch Fortnite and play Fortnite, there's hundreds of millions of them.
So what he's potentially doing is, if you just look at the pure gaming side of it and winning a game, that's no different to showing the highlights or showing a live stream of a tennis match, for instance.
Yeah, which he doesn't do any of.
Which is interesting, isn't it? So, but that's what all the sports do, is they've got their highlights packages. They give us the score. They might take it behind the scenes, but what he's doing is looking to. So, if we look at that from a market perspective and a communication perspective, that sort of communication appeals to the traditionalists. You know, what the bolted on, rusted on, passionate supporters. Tell me the score. Tell me who kicked the goal. Show me the highlights. That sort of group.
And that has a place as well. So I think that resonates a lot more with people and in general users of Facebook. Facebook is a good place for that kind of content. YouTube, not necessarily.
Well, and that's what we're seeing. And so what he's then doing, then, if I'm converting in really simple terms, and Cam, correct me if I'm wrong, is producing content that the audience actually wants. And in a way that they want to engage in that content, but the audience is clearly much broader than the traditional purists, if you like you and I are for the world game and AFL and cricket, etc. And so
a good example. So Barcelona, again, I just go back to them because they're a good example of kind of just the traditional sport and how they focus on it. They've got some season highlights. They've got a couple of behind the scenes training look at videos. They're getting less views than Lazarbeam's getting for these stunts. But Barcelona on Facebook has 100 million likes. So that they're 6 times the size, 7 times the size of Lazarbeam on YouTube on their Facebook page. So obviously the type of content they're putting out really resonates with a Facebook audience because they're one of the bigger Facebook pages. But they could be doing the same thing. And I would wager a guess that the content that they're putting out on Facebook is quite similar to the type of content that they'll be putting on YouTube. It's just obviously on Facebook, you have more options with putting pictures and some engagement, whereas YouTube, it's video focused. But if you looked at the videos they're putting on Facebook, they're probably very similar.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what other examples have you got? So we'll kind of leave the content side there for today, Ken, because we'll continue to explore this in depth over the coming weeks. Because I think the point of today's exercise, and you can give us some more examples to ram home this point, is that if we kind of say that the way that we're communicating as sport, and I'm really wanting to flick this down to community club level, right? Community club level, there's no reason why a community club couldn't have as big an audience as Lazarbeam.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, obviously. It takes time and it takes a creative mind to find the right angle. But once you do find that, you lean on it and you go with it and you open it up. I don't know if I've said this on air before. I know I've said it to you off air, but I feel like the media department, which may just be a volunteer at a sporting club, at most sporting clubs is one of the most underrated parts of a club, because they really can do so much more than what most of them do, even if it's just one volunteer. If they just try and get outside of the box and try and get outside of, this is what everybody does, so let's go and do what everybody does. I think that's what we really want to try and get away from.
Well, or we want to leverage off and bounce past, and I agree. Underrated's one. I'd go with under-resourced as well.
Yeah, under-resourced for sure.
We kind of say, rightio, social media coordinator, one person, tick that box, where it really should be 5, 6, 7, 8. You know, what we're seeing, even the smallest clubs that do their social and they do their comms, is they need kind of up to 10 people to spread the load and do some different platforms and those sorts of things. So. It's interesting with people we've still got online. So what's your comments? What's your thoughts? I mean, is there an opportunity lost, or it's not relevant, or
what do people think? Because it's like, it on the surface, it doesn't look like an easy way to, I'm sure it's very difficult to look at this and say, okay, I can just bring that to my club. That's easy. Like, it's not an easy thing, but I would love to hear what people think about when they're looking at this type of content, which, on the surface looks very flashy, looks very silly, it looks very cartoony. When you're looking at that, are you thinking, oh, there's no way I can bring that to my club? Or are you thinking, okay, maybe I can think outside the box and find something?
Well, and I mean, I must have looked at that and gone, well, that's very gimmicky, that's very. But then I go back to the first part and say, well, hold on. There's all this opportunity that we're not engaging, so then maybe we need to be learning about what it is, and so we'll explore this content, Cam, and over the next couple of weeks, and maybe we'll get click management on, and why don't we try and get Lazarbeam on and get him and talk to us, and
content.
Let's learn and set ourselves some challenges and see what we can learn from these people, because these are phenomenal audiences, which, again, if you can build an audience at 1% of the size of that on YouTube, so what's 10%? So that's 150,000 followers on YouTube. I mean, you can create significantly more sponsorship than, putting signs on your fence, for instance. So,
and even with the occasional, if you can get something to go viral once a year, you can do a lot more than what you might think you can. If Emma Gallagher's out there, by the way, I do have an answer to the question that Emma threw in from last week's stream, which was asking about cross compatibility with the new consoles that are coming. And I'll answer it now, but just in case Emma's not here, hopefully they see it when they get there. But cross compatibility is not something that's going to be in every single game necessarily on all of the new consoles, but it's certainly going to be a feature. Fortnite have confirmed that they're going to be doing it, but I think it's going to come down to the decisions by the developers of each game. So unfortunately, it's not just going to be a one-size-fits-all, but it is going to be possible for it all to happen. So we'll just have to wait and see what the different esport type of games end up doing on that front.
Beautiful. And we'll tag tag Emma into this post, Cam, so she knows it's there. So what else have we got on before? You've done a lot of research, I see out there on the tab. So
yeah, well, a lot of it's just different. Like trying to look at how the different content platforms get used by the different organizations. A lot of it's very stat heavy. I was looking at cricket.com.au. The way they've kind of gone about it, I guess cricket has realized they have a more, or potentially have a more global audience. And they've gone about things a little differently to how most of the other national sporting organizations have gone about setting up their content channels. And I mean, there's no way to say other than they've been the most successful. They've probably got the most followers on the two big platforms of Facebook and YouTube. I haven't looked at Instagram, but so cricket might be somewhere to go and look at what they're doing different to what other organizations are doing, because they are getting viewers to resonate with them. They're finding a bigger market than what the average sporting association is. So I'm sure there's some learnings to be had there, because they also have a very similar figure. Almost 8 million people following the cricket.com.au branding. But Cricket Australia, for example, there's also branding for that online, and I'm not sure what the difference is between the two, but it's much smaller in comparison.
Yeah, and I think it's not unfair to just note that cricket is competing against international teams, so international audiences are more. There's more relevance to international audiences than, for instance, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, England, which to a degree can
inflate it a bit.
I would assume would inflate it a bit, but those audiences are still there, and they're aiming to capture those audiences, and they are doing a good job of that. So that's really, really, really cool. Cameron. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, sorry. I mean, the last thing I was going to say is, like, if you look at the content that, say, Collingwood is putting out, it does feel very formulaic, very bland. When you just look at it, just on the surface, look at Lazarbeam's last videos.
Yep.
And then look at that. Like, nothing draws you, nothing captures you. So even just the template or the image that you see on the page, it's not capturing you. Yeah, the only reason you're going to watch that is if you know about it and you want to go and find it and you really want to watch it already. Otherwise, no one's going to watch it. So I think I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, and it's all a grind.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, mate, that's fascinating. We'll put our heads together during the week and start to develop a series of guests coming at these different angles that you've really introduced and that we can explore. So I think we've taken up the time, nearly half an hour, Cam, and I don't mean to come into these sessions every week and go, rightio, 15, 20 minutes max. At 20 minutes, doesn't matter what, I'm going to cut it off. But I keep learning. I just learned so much. So I thank you. I thank those that are watching live, and I thank those that are watching the video. At any stage, live or watching the video, put your comments in. Cam will answer the questions in the chat or in the next week's video, and we'll tag you in. But to those watching live, thank you so much. It makes us feel good that it's not just a conversation between two blokes that are very proud that Australia has won the Women's World Cup with New Zealand, the right to host it in 3 years' time, Cam.
In 1,109 days. Can't wait. It's going to be amazing.
Attention to detail is what we are not normally renowned for, Cam. So on that note, to everybody, thank you very much for being part of our sports community.